All right. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here with me tonight. I'm Peter Alessandria, and welcome to the workshop. We had some big storms moving through a little while ago, big thunderstorms, so hopefully it's going to be quiet now. If this is your first time here, welcome. We're going to open up the meeting in the second half for people to ask questions and to answer the exercises that we had for tonight. So let's jump in with our agenda for this evening. So we're going to spend a few minutes on announcements, then we're going to have our topic discussion until about 8:30, and then we're going to take a little bit of a break, and then when we come back, we're going to do the exercises that I had sent out with the meeting information. You guys will have a chance to share your answers to those exercises, and we can also do some Q&A. And then tonight, before we finish, I want to hear about victories. I want to hear how you guys have been applying the principles from my book, Be Bigger Than You Think You Are, and how it's changed your life. So we want to have, each week we want to have an opportunity for people to share their victories. It's inspiring for me, and I'm sure it's inspiring for other people. So let's jump in with the first announcement. Once again, if you guys don't already have the book, I do have a discount code available for you guys. It's Workshop 20. If you already have the book, you want to get one for somebody else, you can also use the code for that. At checkout, just put it in the little promo code box. And it's all one word, Workshop 20. It's save you about $4. And these are author-signed paperbacks, so I will personally sign it to you, for you. Next, a reminder that I'm working on the audiobook, and it is available for pre-order at $9.99. That's a little more than half off the regular price. You can pre-order it now. Now I'm saying it's probably going to be available September 1st, and I'm actually going to play an excerpt for you guys tonight, a little 5-minute excerpt from the audiobook, so you can hear what that's like, and it's also relevant to our discussion for tonight. And you can find that at bebiggertoday.com/bookstore. And then once again, I am available for one-on-one coaching for anybody who wants to do some one-on-one work with me. I'm available for that. I'm also available to come in if you have a business. I can come in and talk to your management team, talk to your sales team, and help them be bigger than they think they are. So if you're interested in that, you can reach out to me on my website or by email, and we'll set it up. All right, so we're picking up with the topic that we started last week, and that topic was, who do you think you are? Now, as I said, I feel like this is the most important question we can ask ourselves, for the simple reason that whoever we think we are is exactly who we're going to end up being in life. So for me, it's been a very important question to say, how do I see myself in this situation? For a long time, I thought it was a situation that was causing me to act the way I acted, to feel the way I feel, to think the things I thought. And I realized that it was my own self-image, it was how I saw myself in that particular situation that was at the root of my actions and reactions. So as I say here, how we see ourselves determines everything. Now, everything we think, feel, say, and do is an expression of who we think we are. So every thought that I think, every feeling that I have, every word that I say, and every action that I take has at its root my self-image, who I think I am, how I see myself. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is how to become more aware of how we see ourselves in a given situation. So, as I say all the time, the problem is never the situation. The problem is always and only how we see ourselves in that situation. Now, it turns out that that's actually really good news, because we often can't change the situation, but we can almost always change how we see ourselves. So if you have the book, you know in Chapter 1 I give an example. And the example that I give is, let's for instance say that you find out that you lost your job. The unexpected loss of a job. And in many situations, we can't really change the fact that we've been laid off or fired or whatever it was. But we do get to choose how we see ourselves in relation to that situation. So one of the things that I say here is stress comes from focusing on things we have no control over. So in a situation where I get laid off from my job, I don't have any control over the company's decision-making process. I don't have any control over the terms of the layoff. I don't have any control over anybody else who might have been laid off or let go. And as to the extent I focus on those things, stress comes from focusing on things we have no control over. So what I'm suggesting here is, instead of focusing on the situation, focus on what we can control, and that is how we see ourselves in that situation. Now, we're going to come back to that in a minute. So the example that I use in the book is the person who comes home and they see their family and they say, I was laid off from work today. If you want to know how you see yourself in a particular situation, look at how you describe it, either to yourself or others, and or your internal thoughts and feelings about it. So if I come home and I say to my wife or my girlfriend or whatever, I say, oh my God, this is terrible, it's a disaster, I don't know what I'm going to do, there'll never be another job like my old one, I'm too old to compete in today's marketplace. All of those statements, the way I'm describing that situation, probably can tip me off that how I see myself in that situation is not very positive. It's actually rather negative. I'm filled with fear because I don't think I'm going to be able to find another job, or there's going to be some consequences that I can't control. There's going to be some negative consequences for me. And likewise, I look at the internal thoughts and feelings that I have about that situation. Now you can contrast that with the person who comes home and says, I'm free. I finally get to do what I want with my life. I'm out of that place. I hated working there anyway. Somebody who comes out and has a very positive way to describe it or to relate to the experience, I would guess that that person sees themselves a little differently than the person who says, oh my God, what am I going to do? This is a disaster. Now the reason this is important, again, is because once we identify how we see ourselves in that situation, we can begin to take action. All right? Now again, what we want to do is focus on things that we have control over. So in this situation, I can begin to, now last week we talked about some of the techniques that we can use to change how we see ourselves. We talked about positive affirmations, we talked about having a vision statement, we talked about guided visualizations, we talked about having a vision board, and I briefly mentioned mind movies. Probably either next week or the week after, I'm going to go through all 5 of those tools in depth for us. But right now, we can begin to change how we see ourselves in that situation by focusing on something positive. All right? One of my favorite affirmations these days is, I got this. I can handle this. I may not know how it's going to turn out, but I know that whatever happens, it's going to be for my highest good. We begin to transform how we see ourselves, and that begins to transform how we see the situation. All right? Now, it's going to take some work. It's probably really helpful to have somebody that you talk to on a regular basis, an action partner, some kind of a coach or something like that, who can give you support around this. The thing we don't want to do is face these difficult situations alone. But the thing I really want to convey is that we get to decide how we see ourselves in every situation. Now, the problem that most of us come up against is that we say, well, all right, it's important to have a positive self-image, I get that, but you know what, I was laid off 10 years ago and it really sucked, and then I lost my job 5 years ago and that really sucked. We have a long history of proof that we can't handle the situation that's in front of us. Now, in the next chapter, in chapter 2 in the book, I talk about why that's so. I'm not going to get into that tonight. The thing I want to let you know is there's a saying in the financial services industry, and that saying is, past performance is not indicative of future results. Okay? And the same is true for you and me. So what happened in our past does not have to define us. But I'm going to go a step further. I'm going to say that what happened in the past was probably based on how we saw ourselves rather than the other way around. So if I go into a situation with a negative self-image, with fear and trepidation, I'm going to actually attract the people, the situations, the conditions that reinforce that belief about me. So by changing how I see myself, and again, I talk about this in the book, When I know that I have a stressful or difficult situation coming up, when I work in advance to change how I see myself going into that situation, I can have a different experience of it. Instead of waiting for the situation to happen and then being overwhelmed or reacting in the way I might have in the past, now I have a choice. Now I have the ability to actually change how I experience the moment. Now, it takes some work. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, I spend a lot of time on this, and my experience has been that when I do invest the time, when I do, chapter 2 in the book is called Taking Responsibility. When I take responsibility for how I feel, when I take responsibility for what I think, feel, say, and do, and I begin to consciously and deliberately change how I see myself, then my experience in the world changes. I attract different people. One of the things that was very difficult for me, especially when I was starting out as a photographer, was I had a lot of very difficult client relationships. I felt they were unreasonable in their expectations. I had problems getting paid. There were lots of struggles when it came to my personal relationships with my clients. When I started doing this work, and I started looking at how the problem was not the other person, it was not the situation, it was who I thought I was, how I saw myself, and I began to shift that, the relationships began to change. Even the same people seemed to interact with me differently. And the only thing that changed was how I saw myself, who I thought I was in that situation. All right, I want to come to this. I found this slide this week. This is a quote from Henry Ford, okay, the great industrialist in the early 1900s. He says, "Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you'll be right." And I think what he's saying there is pretty clear. It's like we get to decide how we experience life. We get to decide the nature of the relationships we have. We get to decide, our business, how our business performs, romantic relationships, intimate relationships, our relationships with our kids. It all depends on how we see it, okay? And most of the time, what I have done, and I know a lot of other people are like this, I look outside myself and say, well, a minute ago, so here's a good example. So let's say I'm working on something and I get a phone call and somebody is complaining to me about something. I'm not going to mention any names. And after I hang up the phone, I don't feel good. Before the phone call came, I felt fine. After the phone call, I don't feel so good. So my mind says, well, it must be that person's fault. It must be they caused me to feel the way that I feel. And what I found is that's me not taking responsibility for my feelings. Again, I'm going to talk a lot more about that when we get to chapter 2. But what I recognized was, I get to decide the meaning. I said this last week, and it's in the book. I get to decide the meaning of every experience I have in my life. And when I give something a positive meaning, I have a positive reaction. When I give something a negative meaning, I have a negative reaction. Now you might say, well, of course, if somebody walks up to me and puts a gun in my face, I'm going to have a negative reaction. Now that's an extreme example, but the truth is, even in that situation, I get to decide how I feel. I get to decide how I see that other person. I get to decide how I see myself. Now hopefully we're not going to have such extreme situations in our life. It may be something much similar, like dealing with a client or dealing with somebody that you're in a relationship with, dealing with your kids and all of that. Again, I found that for me, the more prepared I am when I go into a situation, I look at my past interactions with that person, let's say it's a client, and I say, well, I had some challenges with this person. He was very impatient. He had very high unreasonable expectations. And the problem was, I thought that his feelings and his reactions were my fault. And so I have codependency issues, so I take on somebody else's emotional, in this case maybe turmoil, but it could just be somebody else's emotional I want to be nice, upsettedness. And so I remember that. And when I go into that situation again with the same person, I say, okay, wait, I don't have to be the person that I was in the past. I get to decide how I interact, how I react, how I respond to this person in this situation. All right? So again, what we want to do is we want to raise our awareness about how we see ourselves in a particular situation. Because here's the thing, I can't change my experience unless I'm aware, I have some consciousness about how I'm reacting and why I'm reacting that way. So I found, for instance, in a lot of my client relationships, both when I was an attorney and as a photographer, I often felt like I was a little kid, like a child, when I was dealing with clients. And I could see I was afraid of being told I did something wrong. I was afraid of criticism. I was afraid of being shamed for something I had done. And so I went into that situation with those thoughts and beliefs about myself. And it was those thoughts and beliefs about myself that caused the negative reaction. It wasn't what the other person was doing or not doing. So we have a choice in terms of how we deal with life because we get to decide who we are in that situation. So I realize now that my job is to begin to see myself differently before I interact with that client. And a big thing for me has been to realize that I'm not a little kid anymore. I can stand up for myself. I don't have to take on somebody else's dysfunction. I don't have to take on somebody else's criticism. I have tools and techniques now. I know how to set boundaries. There's a whole section in chapter 7 in the book on setting boundaries. So I have lots of ways to deal now with people that I didn't have before. So I don't have to regress. I don't have to revert to seeing myself as that little kid anymore. I have choices. So, what time is it? So let's take a look at the exercises for this evening. All right, hopefully you guys got these, because we're going to share on this when we get back from the break. The first question is, the first exercise was to identify one situation where you're doing well. Because here's the thing, guys. Most of us are doing well in at least one area and probably many more than one areas of our lives. I mean, we have challenges, we have issues, we have problems, but there's probably a lot of places in our lives where things are working. So what we want to do is we want to focus on that. We want to look at how we're handling things well. You may recall one of the exercises last week was to look at a time when you surprised yourself by doing something you didn't think you could do. Today we want to focus on a situation where you are doing well, and then look at how you see yourself in that situation. What is it that makes that situation work for you? Okay? One of the things I was describing before was when I see myself as a little kid, I'm giving my power away to the other person. And again, chapter 3 in the book is all about power, what I call true power. When I recognize that that's dependent on how I see myself, I can change my idea about myself before I go into a situation, as I said earlier, and I don't have to give my power away. I don't have to make somebody else's opinion of me more important than my own. I don't have to be afraid to ask for what I want or need in that situation. I don't have to live in fear of rejection or criticism because my self-worth is not contingent on somebody else liking me, like it was for most of my life. So think about a situation where you're doing well, and let's identify what's working for you about your self-image in that situation. All right, number 2 is we want to identify a situation where things aren't going so well, where you're having some challenges. And so we want to begin to identify, we want to begin to do this process of bringing some conscious awareness to who we think we are in that situation. And so I want you to write down how you see yourself in those situations that challenge you. Do you see yourself as a little kid? Do you see yourself as less than or not good enough? Do you see yourself as unimportant or stupid? Do you see yourself as not capable or not lovable? Okay, we want to begin to identify that, not to make ourselves wrong, not to beat ourselves up. All right, most of us have been doing that our whole lives. That doesn't work. Beating ourselves up never makes us better people, I promise you. But so that we can have some awareness about it, because it's not, see, until I'm aware of what I'm doing, I can't change it. I just think, oh God, this is going to stink. I got to deal with this client. I got to deal with my boss. I got to deal with my sibling. I got to deal with somebody, you know, and I don't get that. I get to choose how that situation goes based on how I see myself in that situation. So we want to write down how you see yourself in a situation that's not working, and then what we're going to do is we're going to compare number 1 and number 2 and look at how we can begin to leverage our positive self-image from situation 1 and bring that into situation 2. If I can see myself differently in a difficult or challenging situation, I always, always, always end up having a different experience. Okay? And the more positively I can see myself, the more positive the experience goes. All right? And that was, you know, the recognition of that was the impetus for writing this book. I shared last week about how when I started out as a photographer, I had a lot of challenges. And at first I thought it was the economy, you know, and then I thought it was all the competition from all the other photographers out there. And then I thought it was because I didn't have the latest and greatest camera equipment. And then I was sure, I was positive it was because, oh, I didn't go to photography school or art school. But again, it turned out none of that was the problem. The only problem was in here, and that was how I saw myself. I saw myself as not good enough, not talented, unworthy. People are going to criticize me, and I am not going to be able to handle it. And if that's how I see myself, guess what, guys? I'm not going to want to do anything that involves me putting myself out there where people can criticize me or, you know, pass judgment on me or my work. What I found out was the only person that I had to worry about, the only person's opinion of me that I had to worry about was my own. It was my opinion of myself that was causing all the negative feelings, that was causing the fear, which kept me stuck for almost 3 years. And it wasn't until I recognized that and began to see myself differently and treat myself differently, being nicer to myself, becoming, again, as I said last week, going from being my own worst enemy to my own best friend. That's when things began to change. All right, so what time is it? Why don't we move into our break, and then when we come back, you guys will have a chance to share. You can also ask questions, you know, that kind of thing, and we'll go from there. All right, so we're going to take our break. Okay, we're back. So let me just say real quick that the obvious problem with approaching our life from a place of stress or fear or whatever is we don't make the best decisions. It creates problems in our body. It creates problems in our minds. It creates problems in our relationships. So as I talk about in chapter 4, when I begin to see myself differently, I see the world differently. I see other people differently. And my relationships reflect that. My health reflects that. My financial situation reflects that. So the reason we're bringing all this attention to how we see ourselves, who we think we are, is to begin to change how we experience our lives. It's the negative emotions that create a lot of problems, obviously, for people. So let's jump back. I want to just go back to the exercises, and what I'll do is we can open it up if anybody just wants to say hello, share have a question, or share one of their answers to the assignment. So you can just unmute yourself if you want.
Should I start, Peter?
Go ahead, Barbara. Yeah, you're up.
All right. Well, you know, I also, I guess the last 2 or 3 years, wanted to change myself too. You know, many times, and you've heard it, that I had such negative reactions what people would say about me, which I couldn't understand because I thought it was fine. So what was it, 2 months ago? My one job was changing. They were closing. and another job came up, but we're in the middle of a coronavirus. So nobody's interviewing, nobody's doing anything, but I pursued it. And it's in a rectory. So what happened is the boss or the priest, he didn't know how to go about it, but what he did is he knew where I was, and he contacted people that knew of me. And I just cannot get over what people said about me. I mean, I was the greatest thing since sliced bread. I mean, I'm just saying, where people, you know, I didn't know it was happening, but people said this and said that, and the bottom line is he had no choice but to hire me because I was the greatest thing. So what I'm trying to say is that that is an obvious change from what used to happen to me. If you remember, when I was a flight attendant and when I was leaving, somebody gave me all the, I don't want to say reviews. What is it when they, I guess, kind of review you, whatever they do. And they were so negative, it was unbelievable. I mean, it shocked me. I was like, is that really how they felt about me? So, you know, you can change. And I wanted to change, and I did change. And then I heard the change from somebody.
So it was reflected back to you. But let me ask you this. So do you think the change happened in you first? Do you think that when you started getting, so I remember the job situation, when you started getting the positive feedback and the positive reviews and the references and all of that, do you think, so what was different about you in that situation than you might have been in the past? How did you see yourself in that situation compared to how you might have seen yourself in the past?
Okay. Well, I would have to say in the past, I never got positive reviews. So with this present, to get the positive reviews, yes, it made me recognize that I did the work. I did change. And, you probably don't know if you change or not unless you have a situation like that. And yet there's still so much more to do, because I think, once I got the job, I had more anxiety. I was paralyzed with anxiety. So, of the job. So we still have a lot of problems, but there was something good that came out of something. And so there's a lot more work that has to be done.
Right. But I mean, it takes, it doesn't happen all at once.
Right.
So that's great. And so the anxiety that you feel is in response to you feeling what? I'm not good enough. I'm going to mess this up. Somebody's going to yell at me.
Yeah, well, not yell, but okay. I'm too old to get yelled at. I'm older than that.
Disapprove of me.
Okay. Yeah, all those things. Isn't it a shame?
Well, no, it's not a shame, and it's totally natural. But the point is, we get to decide if that's true about us or not.
Okay,
we get to decide. We get to say, even if somebody, here's the thing, I realize now that even if somebody criticizes me, and even if they're correct in their criticism, I still don't have to feel bad about myself. I can take that as just feedback. I can take that as a message that I need to improve on something or I need to change something. But I don't have to take it as a comment on my value and worth as a person, because now I see myself differently. I see myself as having value and worth before I go into the job or before I go into working with that person. So my feelings about myself are not dependent on what and I'm saying this very deliberately, on what I think they think of me.
Exactly. Yeah, that did change. I mean, I definitely went into that job with confidence and more self-worth than I ever did before, because I got that feedback. But as I was saying, there was still obviously something there, or something with me that, because I was paralyzed, I didn't want to go into a new job.
So in chapter 4, I talk about fear, all right?
Yeah,
and fear,
it was fear.
Fear is a paralyzing emotion.
Yeah.
Now, there is the fight or flight response. That's actually a little different, but in most cases, fear shuts us down, okay? And we become, like you said, paralyzed, immobile. And it's basically we're afraid to take action. We're afraid to move into a new situation because of what the ramifications that we think is going to happen. But here's the thing: it's not what we think is going to happen. It's that we think we can't handle what's going to happen. See, if I knew I could handle, I've had this experience now with clients where I can handle a difficult personality now. I know how to interact with that person. I know how to take care of myself. This is the biggest thing ever, learning how to take care of myself in situations with challenging people. Learning how to stand up for myself when it's appropriate, learning how to not emotionally caretake other people, learning how to be empathetic without enmeshing, learning how to be my own person, not making what I think other people think of me more important than what I think of myself. There's a lot of freedom when you get to that place. Okay? Still want to do a good job for my clients, I still want to be of service. I still want to get a good result for them. I still want to make sure that their needs and expectations are met. But the difference is I trust myself to take care of myself if things don't go exactly the way I want them to, or if the other person has a reaction or whatever. So I'm not as reactive as I used to be. And I don't have to give up my peace of mind. I don't have to sabotage the relationship. I've had several situations, actually right before the crisis hit, I got a new client, and this guy was pushing all my buttons. I mean, he was the epitome of a challenging personality for me. But I was aware of it, and as I was interacting with him, I was monitoring my thoughts. I was reminding myself that I'm safe. I was reminding myself that I could take care of myself. I was reminding myself that nobody has the power to make me feel anything. And I talk about, regressing to feeling like a little kid. See, when I was a little kid, I didn't have the option. I didn't know how to take care of myself. I couldn't take care of myself. I was dependent on other people to take care of me. And now, as an adult, if it really gets bad, I could just get in my car and drive away. And I literally was reminding myself of that while I was dealing with this person. And, it turned out that we had a great relationship. He was a great client. I'm hoping that once everything blows over, he comes back with some more work. But it was an opportunity for me to practice, as they say in 12-step programs, my recovery. I got to practice all the principles. I mean, that's one of the hard things about writing a book like this. It's like I got to apply this in my life in real time with real people. So that was a perfect example. I went in the past, that guy he would have spun me out. It would have been a nightmare. I'm sure the whole thing would have imploded at some point. And it turned out to be a great experience just because of how I saw myself, just because of how I reacted, responded, and interacted based on having a new idea about myself, seeing myself differently. Good, Barbara. And I'm telling you, great things are coming for you. I know it. But here's the thing. We got to walk through it. We got to go through the challenges.
Yeah.
It's just like building a muscle. This is why people go to the gym.
No, I understand. It's a daily thing. I do feel that way. I'm at that place. Every
And
day is.
it takes some consciousness, it takes some,
Yeah.
being aware in the
Yeah,
moment,
we
which isn't
talked
always
about
easy.
that. Yeah. If you're, you're talking to somebody, it's not like I'm a sponge, but I'm certainly a person that's open to this. And hopefully I think there's a lot of other people that are too.
All right, great. You know what? I forgot, guys. I want to play that excerpt. This is actually really good. So I want to play, it's about 4.5-minute excerpt from my audiobook. All right? So anybody want to say anything before I do that? It fits perfectly with this, although it's kind of it's a silly story that happened in my life, but I think it really shows this. All right, I'm going to play it now. And we'll come back. Adamant. Let's take a look at an example from my own life that illustrates how who we think we are relative to a situation determines our experience of it. Now, this is definitely not an inspiring tale of bravery or courage. In fact, it's just the opposite. But it's a good example of how who I thought I was influenced my experience with some household pests several years ago. Disclaimer: kids, always get your parents' permission before using household cleaning products, especially for anything other than cleaning. When I was first considering the idea that how I see myself determines everything, I was looking for a concrete example of that. Staring down at the ground, at the concrete no less, I saw a bunch of little red ants scurrying around on the sidewalk. I thought, I see myself as being able to take care of myself in relation to these ants. I don't feel threatened by them. Rather, I see myself as powerful. I know that in less than a second I can crush them under my heel and not think twice about it. Footnote 3. Before people get upset about me killing things, just so you know, 1, I never touch these little guys, and 2, I have no less than 4 empty plastic yogurt containers strategically placed around my house so whenever I see a stray bug inside, I can gently scoop them up and place them outside. Back to the text. Here I thought was the perfect example of how who I thought I was relative to a particular situation determined how I reacted to it. Well, it's funny how life works sometimes. Actually, it's not so funny, as you'll see in a minute. A few weeks later, I was in my kitchen and I noticed a couple of red ants walking along the counter. I didn't think much of it and got on with what I was doing. The next day, I woke up and saw a bunch more. Now, my kitchen is usually pretty clean. There definitely wasn't much to attract these little critters. So I thought to myself, this is just an anomaly, a seasonal thing. They'll be gone in a couple of days. Well, the next day came and there were ants everywhere. Walls, counters, floor. I'm not a bugophobe, but this truly freaked me out. I started to panic. Because I don't normally kill bugs, I don't keep any insect spray in the house. So I grabbed the only spray I had, window cleaner. I sprayed the shit out of those little guys until nearly half the bottle was gone. Unsurprisingly, it turns out glass cleaner works pretty well as an insecticide, and eventually most of the ones who weren't already dead scattered for higher ground. Now, I'm not telling you this story to convince you window cleaner is a good way to get rid of bugs. What I want you to see is how in that moment the idea that I could take care of myself vis-a-vis the ants went out the window. My highly upset internal reaction shows my lack of certainty that I would be okay. Who I thought I was in that situation was basically screwed. The point of this sad, somewhat silly story is they were still the same little ants I had seen scurrying around on the sidewalk a few weeks earlier, the ones I was so confident didn't pose a threat to me. Yet now, because I saw myself differently in relation to them, I had a whole different reaction. You might be thinking, well, wait a second, there's a lot more ants, it's not really the same situation. And I would say perhaps, but consider this. Regardless of how many ants there are people in the world who would not have been freaked out by them. They might be entomologists or they might be exterminators, but not everyone would have the same reaction I did. This is because how we see ourselves in a given situation determines how we react to it. If the situation were responsible for our reactions, then everyone would react the same way. So, if even one person responds differently, this shows pretty clearly that it's who we think we are that drives our experience, not what seems to be going on around us. Of course, I'm not saying we have to live with ants or anything else we might consider to be a problem. It's okay to resolve whatever issues we're confronted with in life. The thing we don't want to do, however, is let our negative reactions run the show. If we're freaking out, chances are pretty good we won't make the best decisions. We may actually end up doing more harm than good. Note to self, don't spray blue glass cleaner on white kitchen curtains. Another reason I'm bringing up this example now is, as we'll discuss later in this book, many of us rely on negative emotions to take care of ourselves. In particular, we use anger to get through difficult situations and as a form of protection. Imagine that if instead of ants, my problem was with another person. In my frantic attempts to solve the problem, I grabbed the glass cleaner and started spraying that person. Harmless, perhaps, and also kind of funny, but probably not a good solution. Now imagine that if instead I grabbed a loaded gun. Thousands of people every year employ this kind of solution when they see themselves as powerless and threatened. As in my example, how they react is determined entirely by how they see themselves, i.e. who they think they are in that situation. All right. So hopefully you guys heard that okay. I can't hear it on my end. I'm assuming nobody waved or anything, so I'm guessing you're able to hear it. So that's a silly, it's kind of a silly story, but I think it illustrates the issue so well. You know, it was the exact same situation, in my mind at least, and yet based on how I was seeing myself in relation to what was happening around me, I had an entirely different reaction. So we're talking about bringing some conscious awareness to how we interact with life, not based on what somebody else is doing, but based on what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, feeling, saying, and doing. As I said last week, my thoughts lead to my feelings lead to my words and actions, and my words and actions lead to the outcomes that I experience in life. So if I have a situation where the thoughts, I shared this when I was talking about public speaking. When I go into public speaking, if the thought is, people are not going to like me, you know, I'm not attractive, I don't have anything worthwhile to say, they're going to judge me, those thoughts, those negative thoughts lead to the negative feelings. It's not the fact that I'm in front of an audience with other people. In a real sense, it has nothing to do with them. So it's how we see ourselves in each situation that dictates how our experience goes. All right, so let's go back to our exercises. Does anybody else want to chime in? Someone?
Hey, it's Fred. I'll speak up.
Fred,
Hi, hey, Peter.
happy birthday.
Oh gosh, happy birthday! Thank you. It's true. It is true. So,
I'm glad you're able to make it.
yeah, thank you, thank you. Me too. Thank you for offering this. What did a situation where I was doing well? I guess I wrote about two of my clients that I'm working with, and I said I am competent, thoughtful, not afraid to give advice and offer perspective, but willing to listen to their needs and desires. I advocate out of a client's interest, not necessarily about. I try to be somewhat selfless, but I'm also I have a feeling of openness, like I'm not going to get like there's mutual respect, and that felt really good. That feels really good to see myself as a competent, full, showing up fully, heart and mind in the relationship. Feels good.
And so what you do, one of the things you do is you provide, you represent your clients, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You provide them, what do you provide, what do you bring to the relationship with them? A level of
Well,
expertise,
I
I'm
bring
sure?
I bring specific knowledge about the field that I'm in, which is real estate, and about that I have a lot of experience that I can bring to bear. I have perspective on a particular. I think I'm also somebody who can see both sides of a situation. That can be helpful sometimes resolving conflict, so I can bring a perspective to that situation. Keeping the client's interest, though, I ultimately, and I listen to them. I don't just, but I'm not afraid to tell them what I think might be a useful way to go.
Great. All right, that's great. I love that. So now tell me about a situation where you may be a little challenged.
Oh, I don't have any of those. I'm just kidding. Okay. Let's see. Well, I wrote this on but I couldn't read my write. Okay, so marketing. When I think about marketing, because I've gotten clients through referral mostly, and I don't put myself out very much in the as far as marketing. And I realized underneath when I think about marketing, I'm not as good as, not as big as, and I'm nothing special. This actually hurts to say all this stuff, but it's true. Special. I'm superfluous, like a little kid. There's some place
Fred,
where
we're having a little trouble hearing you. Your mic
oh,
is cutting in and out.
do this.
So I don't
Sorry.
know if, try that. Let's see if that's better, because I missed the first part of what you were saying.
I
Better now?
No, you're still
Is that
cutting in and
better?
out. What? Say that again?
Oh, seriously? That's no good. Hi.
That's,
Well,
all right,
that's
good.
better.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. I was referring, okay, so when it comes to marketing myself, I'm saying these are the thoughts. I'm not as good as, underneath it, like this little kid part of me gets super freaked out. Like I'm not as big as the other people out there. I'm not special. I'm like a little kid, you know, but just like a little kid. And that I'll be reminded of my place if I try. It's like I'm being about to be smacked down by an older brother, which I think did happen. So that's kind of just a young, vulnerable, scared place to come from.
Right.
And
Right.
you asked us, you want me to tell you about the second part of what that, or the third part where you said, how can I see myself differently?
Sure. Yeah.
I said I can and don't have to be the right person for everyone. If I can be clear about what I offer, including how I propose to deliver that value and what I ask for in return for that value, then I'm on good ground, is to be clear about, those things. That my size, either my history, i.e. previous accomplishments, my company that I work with, or especially my physical body, because that is what comes up as a kid. I was not a big person, and I grew up feeling less than because of being smaller. At least that's a story I told myself. And that those things don't matter. The value, it's really about value, and I have to value myself and understand what I bring to the table. And that means both my experience, in the real estate business, as well as intangible things like what kind of person am I? I'm caring, I'm compassionate, I'm kind. I'm also willing to hold a boundary. I don't want to let fear guide. I don't have to let fear guide me. I can make requests. I can listen to other people. I can speak up for myself. So that would be a different way to see myself, as a person of value, delivering value, and not coming from fear, but coming from just knowing my own value.
Right. Great. So let me just go back a couple of steps. So you shared about what I was sharing about earlier, which is sometimes I see myself like a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some negative experiences as a child. Sounds like you did too. The thing is, it's. I heard you say it doesn't matter, but I would say we don't have to bring that into the present. We don't want to dismiss what happened, because those experiences can create wounds. They can create the hole in the soul, the stuff that happens to us as kids. Again, I talk about this in chapter 1 and 2. The stuff that happens to us as kids, we don't have any way to process it, and we don't have any way to understand it, and we don't have any way to assimilate it in a positive way. And children are egocentric, so we make everything that somebody else does about us when it's not. And then we do have negative experiences. I mean, physical, being beat up by somebody or shamed, those are real experiences. So I don't want to diminish that. But the thing is, we're not that person anymore. And a lot of the stuff that happened that we made about us as kids was never about us. Like, it was never my fault when my mother was upset about something. Now, today as an adult, I say I'm accountable for my behavior, and to the extent a 6-year-old can be accountable for their behavior, that's true. And I'm sure there were times when I did things to push her buttons and all of that. But I'm not responsible for how she reacted. I'm accountable for my behavior, especially as an adult. I'm accountable for my behavior, but I'm not responsible for somebody else's feelings, reactions, and all of that. So remembering that when I go into my adult relationships, and as I begin to say, I don't have to be who I was in the past, that whole idea that I have about myself, there may have been negative experiences. When I say, I think last week I said, we make up a lot of things. And I think that's true, but it's not to say what happened didn't happen. Many of us had difficult, trying experiences as kids. So I'm not saying forget about that or dismiss that, but what I'm saying is we can tell a new story about that. We can change the meaning of that. Remember, we're always reacting to the meaning that we give the situation. And that's up to us. It's up to us to decide what every situation means. It's up to us to decide who we are in every situation. So I love the fact that you have a list of things that you bring to the table when dealing with a client. Your expertise, your experience, your knowledge. You bring so much to the table. So going into the relationship, keeping that in mind, that's how we begin to see ourselves differently. If I don't think I have anything of value to bring to the table, it's going to be an unpleasant experience. It's going to be a difficult experience. I'm going to constantly be, trying to compensate for that. I'm going to constantly be worrying about what they think about me. I'm going to be constantly trying to please them when that may not be in their best interest or my best interest. So as I change how I see myself going into those relationships by having a list of positive character traits, what I bring to the table, it changes everything. So that's great. You want to compare, so did you give us a specific situation where you feel challenged?
Well, I think it's just in marketing. It was general situation, not so much one thing.
So what is it about marketing? Because I could talk for hours about marketing. So what is it about marketing that's challenging for you?
Like I said, it's a feeling in my gut of not being safe. Like it's a really bad idea. I'm going to get hurt if I get exposed. It's really a visceral feeling. Like, don't do it. If I think about it more, and I think it's about that. That I'm gonna be exposed for being the small kid that I am. It's kind of a strange, just a very strange old feeling. Not strange, but it's very familiar.
Yeah, and those are the subconscious thoughts and beliefs that run our lives. All right, I sat on a couch for 3 years because I was afraid of what people were going to do to me if I put myself out there as a creative person. I was terrified of what the haters on Facebook were going to say about my photos. I was terrified about the clients who were going to be disappointed in me. So I never got off the couch. And I wasn't aware. Remember, I thought it was the economy, and I thought it was I didn't have the education. I thought I had all this whole list of things, and people would say, oh yeah, you're probably right. But it had nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
That's why this work is so important. So we're kind of going below the surface. So the feelings that you're identifying, now again, I don't, they have some basis in fact. You probably had experiences as a kid when you couldn't defend yourself. So in a way, it makes sense to have those feelings because those feelings are kind of protecting us. I felt very safe on my couch. I didn't have to worry about what other people were going to do to me. So in a way, it was keeping me safe. But it was based on the fact that I thought I couldn't take care of myself. Let's say somebody didn't like my photos. Here's the thing, guys. I realize now I don't really give a hoot what people think about my work. There's so much freedom in that now because I can tell you right now, this is the way it works. If you're a creative person, listen up. Some people are going to love my work. Some people are going to hate my work. And a bunch of people are going to be in the middle where they don't give a hoot either way. All right? And that's just the way it is. So I realize now I don't have to take any of that personally. And what I found is now I go where the love is. And I don't even worry about the haters. I actually don't have that many. Although I do have a section in chapter 7 where I talk about dealing with haters on Facebook. I had two. I had two haters. They're in the book. But there's so much freedom in that. But here's the thing. So Fred, what I would say to yourself, what I would say to you to say to yourself is, I'm not that little kid anymore. I can take care of myself. I do know how to stand up for myself, or I do know how to navigate relationships in a way that I didn't know how to do when I was a kid. See, Fred, you're not who you think you are. None of us are who we think we are. But that's the next book.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I just want to acknowledge your courage for having the willingness to say all of that. That's the beginning of being free of it.
Yep.
That's
Thank you.
that's being bigger than you think you are.
I'm working
You
on
know,
it.
and the next time you're in a situation now where those feelings come up, you'll say, "Oh, okay, so this is familiar, and this was a way I protected myself in the past, but you know what? I'm not that little kid anymore. I don't need that anymore. I don't need those." See, that's all we had as kids. We didn't have real tools. We couldn't really navigate relationships. We couldn't really take care of ourselves. So we resort to all these other, and a lot of it comes out as a visceral feeling like this is not going to be, I'm not safe. This is not going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
But as I begin to change how I see myself, those feelings go away. I don't have those feelings anymore.
Mm.
They're not as much. And if I do, I know what they are, and I have a choice.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Janet, you're waving. I know you want to say something. Unmute so we can hear you.
No, I'm waving because I had a hot flash.
Oh my God. All right. You have anything you want to chime in on this with this, or questions or comments?
Let's see. Sure, I could go. Okay, thanks, Peter. This is awesome. So where things are going well. Well, what came up for me, the first thing that popped in my head when it said what's going well, is I thought about this beautiful text that I got from my mentor today. We sent her a happy birthday message, and she just sent me back this really beautiful, sweet text. And so I'm constantly asking myself how it is that she's wanted to be my friend. So I get that she wants me to be, like she's accepting me as a protege or whatever, but you know, I do pay her for consultation still, even though we're friends. And we've just had a way to navigate that relationship to be professional and personal. But what's been special, and this doesn't mean to sound conceited or whatever, is we had lots of groups with my mentor, and I know that she's not friends with the other folks in the group, that those were proteges, but they didn't become her friend. So I asked myself, like, why me? You know, like, what did she, how come she wants to be my friend? So I try to be aware of that, because sometimes it's kind of like so I'll think of that as an example. The fact that Crystal wants to be my friend is something went well in these years, that she chose me to want to be her friend. I know it's a strange example, but so I wrote that. And then an area, what was the other question? How do
Where we're
you
challenged. Things didn't go so well. Aren't going so well.
Things aren't going so well. I'm probably going to talk about this topic, you know, over any of these classes I do with you, because it's just an area of my life that I struggle in. And that is, I struggle in organization and clutter. So that has been, I would say, probably my whole life. And so, so in that situation, I have a hard time coming up with the affirmation, I can do it, you know, because my history has told me that I can't. I mean, I did recently move and downsize, and I did get rid of a lot of stuff, but I still struggle with organization. So I would that would be my biggest area.
All right, good. Well, I totally related to the first part. You know, it's like being surprised that somebody likes me. You know, and it sounds crazy. Even when I say it now, it sounds crazy. You know, but I lived most of my life that way. When you read the book, you'll see, I mean, I talk in there about how I was so convinced. So I say, I only have two problems in my life. All right. My first problem is that I perceive myself as unlovable. And my second problem is I perceive myself as powerless. And the unlovable came up in all my relationships, with friends, romantic relationships, work relationships. I was convinced that once they got to know me, they weren't going to like me. And especially in my relationships with women, I would sabotage the relationship because I was so convinced once they found out who I really was, they were going to reject me, they were going to leave me. And so I would undermine the relationship. I just couldn't believe that I was a lovable person. And it sounds crazy even now as I say it, but it was so deeply ingrained in me that I never questioned it. I thought that was just the way it was. And I was going to have to deal with it. And I found all these crazy ways to deal with it, including drugs and alcohol and other things, as a way to cope with the stress of that. And of course, what was underneath that was that I didn't like myself. And I'm projecting that out onto everybody else. So, beginning to see myself differently, one of my affirmations is I'm lovable. Actually, when I show you guys in a couple weeks, I'm going to show you my mind movie. And I am working on a list of affirmations. I will have that for you guys soon. But one of the affirmations in my mind movie is I'm totally irresistible. And, just beginning to see myself differently because all that stuff was made up. I misinterpreted the information that I was getting from the adults in my life when I was a kid. I misinterpreted that to say there must be something wrong with me. Another affirmation in the mind movie is there's nothing wrong with me. But I didn't even, after a while, it wasn't a conscious thing. It just became who I thought I was. And so I was compensating for it here and there, everywhere, in all my relationships. So I get it. I totally get it, and I think the gift is to begin to recognize that I have that kind of predetermined thought about myself going into my relationships and to begin to question that, is that really true? Now, I've done some things in my life that I'm not proud of. I've certainly, I've had my share of unenlightened interactions with people, selfish, things like that. But even all of that, that's just part of the human condition. That doesn't make me a bad person. Unlovable means I'm not capable of being loved. There's something about me that's inherently incapable of being loved. That was the takeaway that I got from my relationship as a kid with my parents, in particular my mom. And I never questioned that. So I love the fact that you're aware that maybe this is an issue that you bring, perhaps not at the same level or to the same extent, but the minute I say, gee, I wonder why they like me, it's based on this underlying thought that I'm not likable. And that's what I got to work on. That's what I got to change. Because that was never true. I mean, look at me. I'm adorable. How could somebody not love me? So I carry this idea about myself that's not serving me. It was never true. It was totally made up based on a situation I had no control over. And honestly, I'm seeing now that I misinterpreted all that stuff anyway. My mother in particular loved me very much. She just had a different way of showing it. And so I misinterpreted all of that, and I created this whole story, and I lived a life based on that story. And it sucked, which is why I wrote this book. In terms of your challenge, so again, I think I said this to you last week, how do you see yourself in relation to the organization or the clutter? What's getting in your way with that? Why is that? What is the self-image, the self-concept that's blocking you? Do you think?
You know, I am,
What's going to happen to you if you do it or don't do it?
well, one of the things I'm learning in my marriage is that I am lovable and my husband loves me anyway. He does periodically, and he has done this recently, get really burned out on it. Um, but it's not really me. It's more of like, it's not, how can I explain? Like, yeah, it's more of like it's infringing on his, he'll be like, I want, the closet a certain way or whatever. So um so sometimes I think it's neurological. Like sometimes I just think like just I'm just not wired right, Sometimes I'll just, and sometimes I can get into acceptance with that, meaning like, okay, you probably do need more help than most people with some organization. Um so I'll be in acceptance about that. But even that, like, I just don't have the belief that I can maintain it. Like I can get a place organized, but within no time, and my mom's taught me about this since I was, you can make the mess faster than anyone I know. And so, yeah, like I don't know how, I don't know what the belief is.
Well, you just said it.
Yeah.
That belief, that can run your life. You can make a mess faster than anybody,
Sure.
you know. I mean, this is what happens. It's like, you got to get this, guys. We're programmed,
Yeah.
but it's literally like a computer being programmed.
Yeah.
I see it with my little nieces and nephews, they listen to everything, and because they can't discern, they can't get the nuance, they can't get the subtext or whatever. Kids are very literal. They're very, very literal. They're egocentric and they're literal. And it's a dangerous combination, because if we don't look at those thoughts and beliefs, they're going to run our lives and we'll never know it.
I just had an aha. Do I have one more second? Or
Sure, yeah, go.
okay. So I just had an aha. And it's not like I haven't thought this before, but just the fact that I had it while you were talking seems kind of significant. So I have a mom who if she uses something or does something, she must put it away that moment, like that second. It doesn't matter what's going on. Like she can't move on to the next thing unless everything is perfectly tidy. Right. So I do know at some level that made me feel unimportant. Like she was very task oriented and it was always about tasks. So yes, there does feel like there's some part of me that like almost hates tasks for that reason. You know what I mean? I don't know. Like I don't want to finish it. Like I don't know. It's like whatever else is definitely more important than that, because more important than the task. Everything's more important than the task, because for my mom, everything only was important was the task.
Right.
So something in that vein.
Let me just say, for the record, for me, my mother has read this book.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I love my mother. We have a great relationship. So whatever I say, whenever I say it about my relationship with her, because that was a formative relationship, like it is for many of us. I in no way casting dispersion on her. She is a wonderful, in fact, she's better now than ever. So I'm so grateful she's in my life. I really do love and appreciate her, and I understand much better that she really did and does love me. She just has a different way of showing it. And she had a tough time expressing herself, a lot of pressure, a lot of responsibility. My mother was also very organized, Janet, and everything needed to be put away.
Oh no.
And so I relate to that as well. Now, I don't want to, this is not therapy and all that, so I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But think about maybe the not wanting to clean up or get organized or whatever is in reaction. It's almost rebellion.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's almost, screw you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, it's for sure.
But here's the other thing too.
And I don't want to be like you. Like, I don't want to be like
I don't want to be like you. Yeah,
yeah.
I get that. And the other thing that came up, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I think you mentioned, do you have trouble just organizing things, or do you have trouble letting go of things, like throwing stuff away or giving stuff away?
Both.
Because the other thought that came to me, which I don't have this so much, but I just thought I'd mention it, is being afraid of losing something. Being afraid of not having enough. When we start decluttering our lives, we're giving stuff away. I know for me, actually I had this for a long time. It was like I kept everything because I thought I might need it someday. And it actually turned out that there are things that I'm glad I kept,
Right.
but for the most part, when I started just letting stuff go, and it comes from the idea that there's not enough, which is a core belief for many people, but even underneath there's not enough is I'm not enough.
Mm-hmm.
So if I let stuff go, somehow I'm going to be even less. And again, I don't want to get too psychoanalytical. I'm not a therapist. It's been a long time actually since I've been in therapy, but that kind of comes up for me when I think about this. So take what you like and leave the rest, as they say.
Thanks, Peter.
All right, who else? We still have a few minutes. What time is it? Yeah, we got time. Who else wants to say something? Thank you, Janet.
Thanks.
Helena, are you there? You have anything you want to say?
Yeah, sorry guys. Actually, I was listening today. Sorry about that.
All right, no worries. That's fine.
Well, actually, quickly, I want to say that that possession consciousness is like one of the biggest challenge I have at the moment. Because I think you're right about that. Because I actually, moved across the country, and I was totally new here, and I kind of think that for a while I really got into like holding stuff, like, a little bit of that like shopping addiction. And, I think I'm trying to actually let go of it, but at the same time, it's not easy because, yeah, like I think that I look at my things and maybe I think of them as an extension of myself, my identity. So I'm kind of afraid of letting them go. So I can totally relate to what you say. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Good. I get it. And, it is a safety thing. It's a security thing. And here's the thing, guys. We don't want to make ourselves wrong for any of this, because it's bad enough that I do some of the things I do, but the real problem is that I hate myself for being that way. So whatever you're talking about, whatever your challenge is, ultimately, and that's chapter 7 in the book, it's to forgive myself for that stuff. Because most of my life it was bad enough that I was, even like public speaking, I used to beat myself up for being afraid of speaking in public, or whatever it was. The problem wasn't the character defect, if you will. The problem was that I hated myself for being that way. So if you have an issue with clutter, or if you have an issue with self-esteem, or if you have an issue with whatever, that's just, we all have that. We all have something. And many of us have multiple somethings. So it's becoming my own best friend is like loving myself in spite of all of that stuff. And that's what makes room to heal it. That's what makes room to do things differently. Ultimately, I'm going to talk about this in a couple of weeks. Ultimately, it's the self-recrimination that is the problem. It's the self-recrimination that keeps me stuck in these habitual ways of being that don't serve me. It's the self-recrimination that makes me not want to get off the couch or not make those cold calls and marketing calls for my business, or whatever it is. So if once I remove the self-recrimination, I could start to do things differently. and that comes from forgiving myself. Some of you guys are familiar with 12 steps. I always used to say step 6, I will be entirely ready to have God remove all my defects of character when I'm willing to love myself in spite of them. Because I judge myself for being judgmental. I condemn myself for being whatever, and I hate myself for all these defects that I think I have. So we want to move away from that and then begin to say, okay, so how can I see myself differently so this is not such a challenge for me? Anybody else want to say anything? I need glasses to see what time it is. 9:23. All right, anybody want to share a victory?
Well, I just wanted to talk about something, and it came up a long time ago. I was, you talked about therapy, and it's not a therapy session, but I do remember going to therapy one time, and the therapist said to me, you are like a person that if you saw a little ant, you will take a shotgun and kill that ant. And that's how I deal with things. And all of a sudden, what is it, 40 years later, I'm thinking, oh, that's what she meant, because I never cared. All I cared about was, I wasn't going to hurt anybody, but I cared about getting rid of that ant at any cost. So
So
it
you,
kind of relates to your story or not. I just probably should have stayed with that therapist and worked things out.
well, yeah, it's funny. My story from my book was about my experience with
Your
the
little,
ants.
yeah, and then it brought back memories of a therapist saying, you'll take a shotgun and just shoot an ant. I was
Well,
like, oh.
it's all based on how we see ourselves. However we're reacting, I have another example in the book. It's a made-up example, but it's somebody walks out of their house and the house across the street is on fire, and they know there's people in there, but they're terrified. They're paralyzed with fear. They know that if they go into that building, they could very easily lose their own life. And so they call 911 or whatever, but there's a moment where they're standing there and they're just frozen because they see themselves as threatened, as vulnerable, as probably going to lose their life. At that moment, the fire truck pulls up, and a bunch of fire people, men and women, jump off the truck. They put on their gear. They rush right into the middle of that burning building, and they save the people. And I say, it's a hypothetical, it's made up, but I say the only difference was how I saw myself versus how the fire personnel saw themselves. They obviously saw themselves differently. So they didn't need the shotgun. They had a way to go in and accomplish the job. Of course, maybe they had some fear or trepidation. I mean, that's normal. But they weren't paralyzed, whereas I couldn't move. And it's all because of how I saw myself. Now, I do say, the difference to a large extent could be they had years of training, they had thousands of dollars worth of protective equipment and all of that. I didn't have that. But the point I make in the book is most of the problems that most of us face on a day-to-day basis don't require thousands of dollars worth of protective equipment or years of training for us to see ourselves differently. It's a small shift. First of all, it's just being aware that the problem is not the situation. The problem is always and only how I see myself in that situation. And then saying, how can I see myself differently? Now, there may be situations where, common sense says don't walk into that building. That's okay. It's okay not to walk into the burning building. But I'm just saying a lot of us have situations where we're challenged and we don't realize that we can have a different experience, not by changing the other person, not by avoiding the situation, hiding out on my couch, hiding out wherever we hide out. We can have a different experience and still show up. We can have a different experience and still deal with a difficult personality, because we know now that we have the key to our freedom. And the key to our freedom is seeing ourselves differently.
Okay.
All right, anybody else? Going once. All right, I'm going to play my favorite song, and then and that's it. I'll see you guys next week. So if you have any questions, you can email me or whatever. I know, Janet, you and I are going to catch up. So, feel free to reach out. And then I haven't decided, I don't know what the topic is going to be yet for next week, but once I know, I'll let you guys know, and I'll put together a little assignment for you guys. All right,
All right,
anybody
thanks
want
a
to say
lot.
anything?
No, good night.
Thank you.
All right, good night. I'm going to play our song.
Thank you, Peter.
Fred, you wanted to know, oh no, Janet, you wanted to know where the song comes from. So this is a song by Robbie Williams. He's a British singer, he's a pop star, I guess. This is a song that's been out for a few years, and I actually heard it at a Dr. Joe Dispenza workshop that I did, and I've been listening to it every day since. So I got it off, you can get it off iTunes, I guess, or Amazon. It's called Love My Life.
Okay.
And Fred, those are all my photos.
Amazing.
So that's what I've been doing for the last 12 years, running around taking pictures.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you.
They are beautiful.
Amazing shots.
Thank you.
Okay.
And they're all available as prints. So if you know somebody who would be interested, let me know.
Yeah. What's your website for your art, Peter
It's my
Alessandria?
name, Peter Alessandria Photography, but I also have some on the Be Bigger Today website. Just go under, let's see if I can find it here, store. Now I forgot where it is. Let's see. So you want to go to store, bookstore, oh, here, photography. So you'll see I have all the, I think there's about 40 or 50 different prints up there that are available.
Okay. Great.
Some abstracts, New York City shots.
Wow. Hmm.
So check it out, my moon shots. All right, guys, have a great week. If you want to reach out during the week, you know how to get me. And tell all your friends, the more the merrier. And we'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Peter.
All right, see you guys.
Bye.
Thank you, Peter. Have a good one.
Thank you.